that had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 7 different alien species had joined together under their banner, creating the greatest empire the galaxy had ever seen. They called themselves the Dominion, and they believed they owned everything worth owning. They had encountered hundreds of primitive species across thousands of worlds. The pattern was always the same. They would arrive with their massive ships, show their power, and the primitives would bow. Sometimes there was resistance, but it never lasted long. No species could stand against the combined might of the Dominion. When their scouts discovered Earth in the year 2187, they expected nothing different. The humans had only recently learned to travel between stars. Their ships were small and crude compared to Dominion vessels. Their weapons were primitive. Their planet was divided into hundreds of different nations that seemed to spend most of their time arguing with each other. They found this confusing. Every other intelligent species they had met had unified their world long before reaching space. War, to them, was something that happened only in ancient history books. It was a sickness that civilizations cured before they grew up. But humans still fought each other. They had wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over things that made no sense at all. Their history was written in blood from beginning to end. The High Tribunal of the Dominion met to discuss these strange creatures. Most of them dismissed humans as dangerous animals who had somehow stumbled upon technology. Ambassador, who had studied human broadcasts for months, disagreed. "There is something different about this species," he warned the tribunal. "They are not simply violent, they are creative in their violence. They adapt, they overcome. I recommend caution." The tribunal laughed at his concerns. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. What could these primitives possibly do? They sent to Earth with simple instructions. He would offer humanity a place in the Dominion. Humans would give up their independence, provide workers and resources, and follow Dominion laws. In return, they would receive protection and access to advanced technology. Arrived on Earth and delivered the offer to the United Nations Assembly. He spoke of the benefits of joining the Dominion. He spoke of peace and prosperity. He spoke of the terrible consequences of refusal. The humans listened politely, then they said no. Was shocked. He explained the offer again, thinking perhaps they had not understood. He showed them images of Dominion warships. He described the fate of species who had refused in the past. The humans still said no. "We did not climb out of the mud and reach for the stars just to become servants," said Secretary General Obi. "Whatever you threaten, whatever you promise, our answer remains the same. We will remain free or we will die free. There is no other option." Reported his failure to the tribunal. They were not pleased. No species had ever refused integration so completely. Something had to be done to restore the natural order. 3 Dominion dreadnoughts jumped into Earth orbit. Each one was 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack continents. They were meant to demonstrate power. They were meant to make humans understand their place in the universe. Commander of the United Nations ship Defiance watched the massive vessels appear on her screens. Her ship was tiny compared to them. Her entire fleet was nothing but insects next to those monsters. But had grown up reading human history. She knew what her ancestors had done against impossible odds. She knew about Thermopylae, about Stalingrad, about all the times humans had faced certain death and chosen to fight anyway. "All ships," she said into her communicator. Her voice was calm and steady. "Weapons free." The battle lasted 6 hours. It should have lasted 6 minutes. The Dominion ships had better weapons, better shields, better everything. But the human pilots flew like maniacs, taking risks that no sane being would take. They crashed their ships into enemy weapons. They flew into blind spots that should not have existed. They fought with a ferocity that they had never encountered. When the smoke cleared, 2 Dominion dreadnoughts were nothing but debris floating in space. The third was badly damaged, limping away as fast as it could. Commander was dead along with most of her fleet, but Earth still stood. The surviving commander sent a message back to the tribunal. His hands were shaking as he recorded it. "They do not surrender," he said. "They do not run away. They fight until death, and they smile while doing it. I have never seen anything like this. I am not sure we can defeat them through force alone." The tribunal received his message in silence. This was not supposed to happen. The Dominion had not lost a major battle in 3,000 years, and they had certainly never lost one to a species that had only been in space for a few centuries. High Commander studied the battle recordings again and again. He watched human pilots deliberately crash their ships into Dominion weapons. He watched them continue fighting after receiving wounds that would have killed any other species. He watched them laugh as they died. "What are they?" he asked no one in particular. Ambassador, standing in the corner of the room, finally spoke. "I tried to warn you, they are not like us. They have been at war with themselves since the beginning of their existence. They have never known true peace. Every generation of humans has fought and bled and died. It is in their blood. It is in their bones. It is what they are." "Then we will show them true war," declared. "We will bring such force against them that even their madness cannot save them. Prepare the invasion fleets, all of them." On Earth, the survivors of the battle were being celebrated as heroes. Commander was given a funeral attended by billions. Her last words were carved into monuments across the planet. "We fight not because we want to win. We fight because we refuse to kneel." But the celebration was mixed with fear. Everyone knew the Dominion would return. Everyone knew the next attack would be worse. The humans had won a battle, but the war was just beginning. General Stone stood before the United Nations and delivered the truth without softening it. "They will come back with more ships than we can count. They will try to burn our world. They may succeed. But I promise you this, we will make them pay for every inch. We will make them bleed for every city. We will make them remember the name of our species for the rest of eternity. They wanted servants. They will find soldiers. They wanted submission. They will find war." The assembly rose to their feet, not cheering, not celebrating, but standing in grim determination. They knew what was coming. They knew many of them would die, but not one of them suggested surrender. Somewhere in the dark between stars, the Dominion was gathering its forces. 12 battle fleets, over 1,000 warships, enough firepower to burn 100 worlds. They believed it would be enough to break the humans. They were wrong. Because the Dominion still did not understand what they were facing. They saw human violence as mindless aggression, like an animal attacking without thought. They did not realize that human violence was something far more dangerous. It was controlled. It was patient. It was waiting. And when the time came, it would show the entire galaxy what happened when you woke the sleeping giant. The Dominion Armada arrived 3 months after the first battle. 12 battle fleets spread across human space like a dark cloud. Over 1,000 warships, each one hungry for revenge. Admiral watched them come from her command post on the moon. She had been a history teacher before the war. Now she commanded what remained of Earth's defense force. "How many ships do we have?" asked her aide, Lieutenant Park. 47, replied, "against more than 1,000. Park was silent for a moment. "What are our orders?" Smiled, but there was no joy in it. "We survive, we fight, we make them hurt." The invasion began with fire. Dominion ships bombarded human colonies on Mars and Venus. Millions died in the first hours. The lunar shipyards where humanity had built its fleet were reduced to molten slag. Earth itself was placed under siege. Dominion ships formed a ring around the planet, blocking all escape. They broadcast their demands on every channel: surrender or face extinction. The humans did not surrender. Instead, they scattered. Had studied how the weak defeated the strong throughout human history. She knew that a direct fight was suicide. So she broke her fleet into small groups and sent them into the asteroid fields, the dust clouds, the dark places where big ships could not easily follow. They became ghosts. They attacked supply convoys and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. They planted bombs on communication relays. They captured small ships and turned them against their former owners. Every day the Dominion lost something. A transport here, a patrol there. Nothing major, but it never stopped. They had never experienced anything like this. They were used to battles with clear winners and losers. This was something else. This was like fighting smoke. High Commander grew frustrated. His mighty armada controlled all the space around Earth, but he could not claim victory. The humans kept fighting, they kept dying, and they kept killing. Why will they not break? He demanded at a war council. We have destroyed their colonies, we have killed millions, we have shown them they cannot win. Why do they keep fighting? Ambassador had been brought along as an advisor. He shook his head sadly. You still do not understand them. For most species, war is about survival. When survival becomes impossible, they surrender. But humans do not think this way. For them, war is about something they call honor. They would rather die fighting than live on their knees. Then they will all die, declared. The siege continued. Months passed. Earth's cities were bombed again and again. The oceans boiled where orbital strikes hit the water. Half the planet was on fire. And still the humans fought. Lieutenant Sarah led a boarding party onto a Dominion cruiser that had been damaged by a mine. She and 15 soldiers cut through the hull and fought their way to the engine room. By the time they triggered the self-destruct, only Sarah was still alive. She recorded a final message for her family before the explosion took her. Tell my daughter I love her. Tell her I died standing up. Stories like this spread through the Dominion forces. Soldiers began to whisper that the humans were not normal beings. They were demons. They were monsters. How else could you explain creatures who laughed while dying? Knew he needed to end this quickly, before fear destroyed his army from within. He authorized the use of a weapon that had not been deployed in 5,000 years. The Awakening Protocol. It was a psionic weapon, developed by the most powerful telepaths in Dominion history. It reached into the minds of an enemy species and found their deepest fears. Then it amplified those fears 1,000 times, turning them against each other. Wars had been ended in days by the Awakening Protocol. Entire civilizations had collapsed into madness and surrendered without another shot being fired. High Psionic Aura was brought out of retirement to operate the weapon. She was old, her scales faded to gray, but her mental powers were still the strongest in the Dominion. Are you certain about this? She asked. The awakening is not something to use lightly. We do not fully understand what we touch when we enter another species' mind. Just do it, ordered. Find their fears, break them. Aura gathered her psionic adepts around her. Together, they focused the weapon on Earth and reached out with their minds, searching for the fears that lived in human hearts. What they found was not what they expected. Aura was the first to make contact. She pushed through the outer layers of human thought, past the conscious mind, down into the deep places where instinct lived. She was looking for fear. She found it, but it was not alone. The fear was there, yes. Fear of death, fear of pain, fear of losing loved ones. But wrapped around that fear, containing it, controlling it, was something else. Something that burned like a star. Something that screamed and roared and demanded blood. It was rage. Not the simple anger of an animal. This was something refined over millions of years. This was the fury of a species that had clawed its way to the top of its food chain through pure aggression. This was the fire that had driven humans to conquer their world, to tame nature itself, to reach for the stars even when the stars seemed impossible. And it was chained. Aura saw now what humans truly were. They were predators who had learned to control themselves. Every human being carried a monster inside them, a beast of unlimited violence. but they had built cages for it. Laws, morals, societies, all of them designed for one purpose: to keep the beast sleeping. The awakening protocol was designed to amplify fear. Instead, it touched those chains. It weakened the locks. It opened the cages. Aura tried to pull back, but it was too late. She had already made contact with millions of human minds. The weapon was already doing its work, but instead of amplifying fear, it was amplifying rage. She screamed as the feedback hit her. Her fellow psionics collapsed around her, their minds burned out by the backlash. She fell to the floor, her eyes wide and staring. "What did you see?" demanded, kneeling beside her. Aura grabbed his arm with a grip stronger than her old body should have allowed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They have caged something ancient, something terrible. They have spent their entire existence learning to control it, and we just unlocked the door." She never spoke again. She spent her remaining days in a medical ward, staring at nothing, sometimes whimpering, sometimes laughing. The medics said her mind had been shattered by something they could not understand. On Earth, something was changing. Private felt it first. He was defending a bunker complex in what used to be Singapore. His unit had been fighting for 3 days without sleep. They were out of ammunition, out of food, out of hope. He had accepted that he was going to die. He had made peace with it. He was ready. Then the awakening touched his mind. Something cracked inside him, something that had been locked away since he was born. He felt fear, yes, but the fear was drowned by something else. A fire that started in his chest and spread through his entire body. His hands stopped shaking. His exhaustion disappeared. His vision became sharper, clearer than it had ever been. He looked at the soldiers surrounding his position, and he smiled. Not because he thought he could win, but because he no longer cared about winning. He only cared about one thing: making them pay. Across the Earth, in every bunker and shelter, in every ship hiding in the asteroid belt, humans felt the same thing. The beast was waking up. The chains were breaking. And the Dominion had no idea what they had done. The change did not happen all at once. It spread like fire through dry grass, jumping from mind to mind, waking the beast in every human heart. Private was one of the first to feel it fully. He stood in his bunker, surrounded by exhausted soldiers, facing an enemy force of 2,000 troops. His rifle was empty. His squad had 40 people left alive. Before the awakening touched him, he had been ready to die defending his position. Now, dying was not the point anymore. Killing was the point. "Fix bayonets," he ordered. His voice was calm, almost cheerful. Lieutenant stared at him. "Sergeant, there are 2,000 of them." "I know," smiled. "That means we each get 50. They charged at dawn. 40 humans against 2,000 aliens. It should have been a slaughter. It was, but not the kind they expected. Moved through the enemy like death itself. When his bayonet broke, he used his rifle as a club. When the rifle shattered, he used his knife. When his knife was stuck in a skull, he used his hands. He felt bullets hit him, felt bones break, felt pain that should have dropped him to the ground. He kept fighting. The human soldiers around him were the same. They took wounds that should have been fatal and kept moving. They screamed not in fear or pain, but in something that sounded terribly like joy. They bit and clawed and tore at their enemies with a savagery that they had never witnessed. When finally fell, he had killed 63 enemy soldiers with his own hands. His last sight was the line breaking, soldiers running away from creatures that simply would not stop. He was still smiling when he died. This scene repeated itself across Earth. Human soldiers who had been defending suddenly attacked. Civilians picked up weapons and joined the fight. Old people, young people, people who had never held a gun in their lives found the strength to kill. The ground forces began to panic. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had faced every kind of enemy, but they had never faced anything like this. Commander Al was leading the assault on the European continent when his troops started deserting. Hardened soldiers, veterans of dozens of campaigns, simply dropped their weapons and ran. "What are you doing?" he screamed at them. "They are just primitives, stand and fight." One of his officers grabbed his arm. "Sir, you do not understand. They are not fighting like soldiers. They are fighting like animals, like predators. I watched a human woman tear out a soldier's throat with her teeth. With her teeth, sir. We cannot fight this." Al tried to restore order, but it was hopeless. The fear had spread too far. His army, which had seemed unstoppable just days ago, was melting away. Reports flooded into the Dominion command ships orbiting Earth. Every report was worse than the last. In Asia, a human counterattack had destroyed 3 bases in a single night. The attackers had not used guns or bombs. They had crept in silently and killed with knives and bare hands. In Africa, human guerrillas had captured a Dominion commander and broadcast his execution across all channels. They had made it slow. They had made him scream. In North America, a group of humans had taken over a crashed Dominion ship and turned its weapons on the invasion force. When reinforcements arrived, they found the crew dead and a message written in blood on the walls: "We are not prey." High Commander watched these reports with growing horror. The awakening protocol had been meant to break the humans. Instead, it had done something far worse. It had removed whatever restraints they had placed on themselves. "What have we done?" he whispered. Ambassador stood beside him. "You unleashed them. For their entire history, humans have been at war with themselves, not just with other nations but with their own nature. They knew what they were capable of. They built entire civilizations designed to control it. Laws, morals, religions, all of it meant to keep the beast chained. And we broke those chains. Yes, and now they have nothing holding them back." Admiral felt the change too, but she was old enough to understand it. She had studied human history her whole life. She knew what humans became when they stopped holding back. She gathered her fleet commanders for a conference. These were men and women who had been fighting a desperate defensive war for months. Now they looked different. Their eyes were brighter. Their movements were sharper. They looked hungry. "You have all felt what happened," said. "The Dominion tried to use some kind of mind weapon against us. They wanted to find our fears. Instead, they found something else." "They found what we really are," said Captain Wei. His voice was cold and hard. "Yes, and now we have a choice. We can use this gift to survive, or we can let it consume us. Remember, what makes us human is not the beast inside us. It is the fact that we can control it. We choose when to fight and when to stop." She looked around the room. Every face showed the same expression: barely controlled violence waiting for a target. "The siege of Earth is breaking," she continued. "The enemy ground forces are retreating. Their soldiers are afraid of us now. This is our chance, not just to survive but to win. But we do it our way. We fight like humans, not like animals." Captain Wei nodded slowly. "We fight hard, we fight without mercy, but we fight with purpose." "Exactly. Every attack, every death, every drop of blood must mean something. We are not mindless killers. We are soldiers. We are humanity's sword, and we will show the Dominion what that means." The human counterattack began 2 days later. It was not the wild, uncontrolled violence that they had seen on the ground. It was something far more terrifying. It was organized. It was efficient. It was relentless. Human ships struck Dominion supply lines with perfect timing. They appeared from nowhere, destroyed their targets, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They used every dirty trick that humans had learned in thousands of years of war: false surrenders, ambushes, traps, psychological warfare. They played recordings of screams over enemy communications. They left bodies arranged in patterns that somehow seemed to mock the dead. They attacked at night, in storms, in any condition that gave them an advantage. The Dominion forces around Earth began to fall apart. Ships that had been ordered to maintain the siege simply left, crews rather than face human boarding parties. Commanders who tried to hold their positions found themselves alone and surrounded. Within 3 months, the siege of Earth was broken, not because humanity had more ships or better weapons, because the Dominion soldiers had looked into human eyes and seen something that broke their will to fight. They had seen the beast, and the beast was smiling. On Earth, the survivors began to rebuild. The cities were ruined. Half the population was dead, but they had won. They had faced the greatest military power in the galaxy and made it run. Admiral addressed the planet from the ruins of New York. Her face was tired, but her eyes were bright. "We survived, we won, but this is not the end. The Dominion will not simply accept defeat. They will come back, and we must be ready." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "The weapon they used against us woke something in our souls, something dangerous, something powerful. We must learn to use it without letting it use us. We must remain human, even when we are at our most inhuman. That is the challenge before us. Not just to win the war, but to survive what we must become to win it." Somewhere in the dark between stars, the Dominion was gathering its remaining forces. They had learned that humans could not be conquered easily. But they had not yet learned the full truth. The beast was awake, and it was hungry for more. Humanity went on the offensive. For the first time since the war began, human ships were not running and hiding. They were hunting. Fleet Admiral Wei led the attack. He had been a captain 3 months ago. Now he commanded every warship humanity had left. It was not a large fleet, maybe 200 vessels, but everyone was crewed by men and women who had felt the awakening. Everyone was ready to kill or die. The Dominion had retreated to a defensive line around their forward bases. They thought they could hold there, regroup, and eventually return to finish what they started. They were wrong. Fleet struck the first base without warning. They came out of hyperspace already firing, their weapons hot, their pilots screaming battle cries that they could not understand. The base fell in 6 hours. No prisoners were taken. The second base fell 2 days later, then the third, then the fourth. The High Tribunal received reports of disaster after disaster. Their mighty armada, which had seemed unstoppable just months ago, was being pushed back. Species that had been loyal members of the Dominion for thousands of years began to question whether they had chosen the right side. High Commander was removed from his position and replaced by Admiral, the most respected military leader in Dominion history. Studied the humans carefully. He watched recordings of their attacks. He read reports from the few survivors. "They are not fighting for resources," he told the tribunal. "They are not fighting for territory. They are fighting because they enjoy it, because they need it. This is something we have never encountered before." "Then how do we stop them?" the tribunal demanded. "I do not know if we can." Wei pushed forward relentlessly. He gave his enemies no time to rest, no time to regroup. He had learned something important from human history. When you have your enemy on the run, you never let them stop running. His tactics were brutal but effective. He attacked supply convoys. He destroyed communication relays. He hit civilian targets that supported the war effort. The old rules of engagement, the careful ethics that had governed human warfare for centuries, seemed to have been forgotten. Called it the doctrine of reciprocity. They tried to break us with fear. Now they learn what fear truly means. Some of his officers were uncomfortable with this approach. Captain Sarah, commanding the battleship Johannesburg, argued against the harsher tactics. "We are better than this," she said during a fleet conference. "If we become monsters, we are no better than them." "They killed half of Earth," replied coldly. "They burned our cities, they murdered our children. There is no better in war. There is only victory." The argument was not settled, but the offensive continued. Then came the turning point. The human fleet arrived at Aura, a colony world with 4 billion inhabitants. This world had been a staging ground for the invasion of Earth. Supplies had flowed from here. Soldiers had trained here. The orders that killed millions of humans had been written here. His fleet had enough firepower to burn the planet to ash. His officers expected him to do exactly that. "All ships prepare for orbital bombardment," ordered. Captain's voice crackled over the communication channel. "Admiral, there are civilians down there. Families, children. They had nothing to do with the invasion. Their government made a choice. Now they face the consequences. This is not war, this is murder." Was silent for a long moment. Around him, his officers waited. The targeting computers were locked. The weapons were ready. One word from him and 4 billion lives would end. The awakening burned in his blood, demanding destruction. The beast wanted to kill. It did not care about civilians or children or mercy. It only cared about blood. But Wei was still human, and somewhere beneath the rage, beneath the hunger for revenge, he remembered who he used to be. He remembered his daughter, killed in the first bombardment of Earth. He remembered his wife, who had survived but could not stop crying. Would they want this? Would they want him to become the same kind of monster that had taken them from him? He sent a message to the planet's surface. "This is Admiral Wei of the United Nations Fleet. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. If you do not surrender, we will begin bombardment. Choose." The planet's governor responded with defiance. "We do not surrender to animals." His finger moved toward the button that would begin the attack. The beast howled for blood. And then another voice spoke. Captain had patched herself into the fleet-wide channel. "This is Captain Sarah. I am invoking Emergency Protocol 17. I am countermanding the bombardment order." Silence. Emergency Protocol 17 allowed any captain to challenge an order they believed was unlawful. It forced a vote among all ship commanders. Stared at his communication screen. "You would risk your career for these aliens." "I would risk my life for our souls. We are not murderers. We are not monsters. We are humans. And humans choose. That is what makes us different." The vote took 3 hours. Every captain in the fleet weighed in. The arguments were fierce. Many wanted revenge. Many had lost family to the Dominion attacks. The beast in their hearts screamed for destruction. But in the end, the vote came down against bombardment. Accepted the result. He was angry, but he was also, in some deep place he did not want to examine, relieved. The fleet surrounded Aura and waited. The planetary governor, faced with certain defeat, finally surrendered after 3 days. When the news reached the rest of the galaxy, it caused an earthquake. The humans had won. They had their enemy completely at their mercy, and they had chosen not to kill. This terrified the Dominion more than any massacre could have. High psionic Aura, still alive in her medical ward but rarely conscious, woke briefly when she heard the news. She laughed, a dry and broken sound. "Now they understand," she whispered to the nurse beside her. "The humans could have done it. They wanted to do it. The beast in their hearts demanded it, but they chose not to. They put the monster back in its cage." She grabbed the nurse's arm with surprising strength. "That is why they are so dangerous. Not because of what they can do, because of what they can stop themselves from doing. They control the beast. They decide when it kills and when it sleeps. No other species has ever had that power." She fell back against her pillow, exhausted. The tribunal thought they were dealing with animals. They were dealing with something far worse. They were dealing with predators who have learned to think. The war continued, but the Dominion's will to fight was breaking. Admiral tried to organize a defense, but his forces were retreating faster than he could coordinate them. Species that had been part of the Dominion began to send secret messages to the humans, asking about terms of peace. Pushed forward, taking system after system, but he no longer targeted civilians. The doctrine of reciprocity was modified. Humanity would fight without mercy, but only against those who fought back. Those who surrendered would be spared. It was a small distinction, but it mattered. It proved that humans were not mindless killers. It proved that the beast was still chained, even if the chains were thinner than before. The final battle came at the Dominion's capital system. The human fleet faced what remained of the enemy armada. It was the largest space battle in galactic history. It lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Dominion was broken. Their fleet was destroyed. Their leaders were captured or dead. 12,000 years of empire had ended in less than 2 years of war. Wei stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the ruins of what had been the greatest power in the galaxy. He felt no triumph. He felt only emptiness. The beast was satisfied. It had killed enough to fill oceans with blood. It had proven that humanity was the deadliest species the galaxy had ever known. But the harder fight was just beginning. Now humanity had to prove it could put the beast back to sleep. The treaty was signed on a space station orbiting a neutral star. It was the largest diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Representatives from every species in the former Dominion attended, along with the human delegation led by Ambassador David. The Dominion, undefeated for 12,000 years, surrendered unconditionally to a species that had been in space for less than 2 centuries. The terms were harsh. Humanity demanded recognition as an equal power. They demanded payment for the destruction of their colonies. They demanded access to all Dominion technology. They demanded a seat on every galactic council. But there was one demand that confused the defeated aliens most of all. Humanity demanded to be left alone. Not conquest, not empire, not dominion over others. They wanted freedom to chart their own course among the stars without interference from anyone. The negotiators could not understand this. They had expected the humans to become the new rulers of the galaxy. They had expected revenge, occupation, enslavement. That was what conquerors did. That was what the Dominion would have done. Ambassador tried to explain. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had lost his entire family in the war. He had every reason to want revenge. "You woke something in us," he said to the gathered delegates. "Something we had spent our entire history learning to control. You thought it would destroy us. You thought we would tear each other apart in madness and fear." He paused, looking around the room at the alien faces. "Instead, you reminded us what we are. We are predators. We are killers. We carry a beast inside us that hungers for blood. This is not something we are proud of. It is simply what we are." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "But that is not all we are. We are also the species that learned to cage the beast. We built laws and morals and societies specifically to control our own nature. Every human child is taught from birth how to manage the monster in their heart. We call it civilization." He turned back to face the assembly. "You broke that cage. You let the beast out. And for a while we became the thing you feared most. We burned your bases. We destroyed your fleets. We made your soldiers afraid to sleep." His voice grew quieter. "But we also chose to stop. At Aura, when we had your people at our mercy, we chose not to destroy them. Not because we could not, because we would not. We put the beast back in its cage." He walked back to his seat and sat down heavily. "That is what makes us human, not the violence, the choice. We decide when to fight and when to stop. We decide when to kill and when to show mercy. That power is our greatest weapon and our greatest burden." The room was silent. "We do not want your empire. We do not want to rule others. We have seen what we become when we let the beast loose, and we do not like it. We want only the freedom to be what we choose to be, not what our nature demands." High Commander, one of the few surviving Dominion leaders, spoke for the first time. "How can we trust you? You have shown us what you are capable of. How do we know you will not simply attack us again when it suits you?" Smiled sadly. You cannot know, that is the truth. We are dangerous, we will always be dangerous. The beast never truly sleeps, it only waits. He leaned forward. But consider this. For thousands of years we made war on each other, nation against nation, religion against religion, ideology against ideology. The death toll was enormous. Rivers of blood, mountains of bodies. We did terrible things to ourselves. And yet here we are. We survived. We built civilizations that lasted. We reached the stars, not because we eliminated our violent nature, but because we learned to control it, most of the time. He spread his hands. You can trust us for the same reason we trust ourselves. Not because we are good, because we are aware. We know what we are. We watch ourselves constantly. Every human is both the beast and the cage that holds it. That eternal struggle is what defines us. The treaty was signed. The war was over. High Psionic Aura died 2 weeks later, but before she passed, she recorded a final message that was broadcast to every species in the galaxy. I have touched the human mind, she said. Her voice was weak but clear. I have seen what lives in their hearts. It is terrifying, it is beautiful, it is like nothing else in the universe. She coughed and continued. They are predators who chose to become something more. Their evolution gave them violence. They gave themselves choice. Every human being carries a monster that could destroy worlds, and every human being carries the will to keep that monster chained. Her eyes seemed to focus on something far away. Do not threaten what they love. Do not awaken what they have caged, because if you do, they will not simply defeat you. They will make you understand in your final moments why they are the most terrifying thing the universe has ever produced. She smiled, a strange and peaceful expression. But also do not fear them too much. They are more than their violence. They create beautiful art. They love deeply. They laugh and cry and dream. The same species that burned our fleets also chose to spare our civilians. That contradiction is what makes them human. Her eyes closed. Remember them, respect them, and pray that they never have cause to unleash the beast again. A century later, humanity had spread across 100 star systems. They had become builders, explorers, artists, scientists. They had made peace with most of the former Dominion species. Some had even become allies and friends. The war was remembered but not celebrated. Monuments were built to honor the dead, not the killing. Children learned about the beast, about the choices their ancestors had made, about the thin line between civilization and savagery. Admiral Ware retired to a small colony world, where he spent his remaining years teaching history. He never spoke publicly about the war, except once. A journalist asked him what he wanted humanity to remember about that time. Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Remember that we won. Remember that we survived. But also remember what we almost became. Remember the beast. Remember that it is still there in all of us, waiting. He looked at the journalist with eyes that had seen too much. We are the deadliest weapon the galaxy has ever known. Not our ships, not our guns, us. Our capacity for violence is unlimited. Our ability to hate, to destroy, to kill, it has no bottom. He paused. But our ability to choose is also unlimited. We can choose love over hate, peace over war, mercy over revenge. That choice is what makes us human. The beast gives us power. The choice gives us meaning. He turned away. The galaxy learned to fear us. Good, they should. But I hope someday they also learn to trust us. Not because we are not dangerous. Because we are dangerous and we choose not to be. That is a harder thing than they know. On every human world, in every human heart, the beast still waited, sleeping, watching, ready. Because that was humanity's truth. They were not the monsters the galaxy had feared, but they were not entirely tame either. They walked a line between civilization and savagery, always aware of the darkness within, always choosing to step toward the light. The Dominion had awakened humanity's deadliest weapon, and in the end, that weapon was not rage or violence or the capacity to destroy. It was choice. The choice to be better than their nature. The choice to show mercy when revenge would be easier. The choice to build instead of burn. That was what made them human, and that was what made them the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen. Not because they could destroy everything. Because they could, and they chose not to.